Okay, so I'm Richard Esplin, and this is the Lightning Talks. Lightning Talks are strictly short 5-minute presentations. They consist of 20 15-second slides. We did allow longer videos this year, but the talks take exactly 5 minutes. So they're going to auto-advance. We have 7 speakers. That means we can only fit 30 seconds between presenters. We're going to be really crisp because we have 39 and a half minutes in a 40-minute session. So that's what we do. These presenters have practiced, and they are very impressive already, I can tell you. So when the gray sign comes up, that's my 30-second warning. When the red sign comes up, I sit down, and then Roy's got 15 seconds before he needs to start. You can start early if you want. So that means I have to sit down.
Okay. Anybody here know what Minecraft is?
Woohoo!
Okay,
Is
that's
your mic
something.
working?
All right, I don't know. Yes,
Yeah?
yes, I'll talk louder. So today I'm going to talk about how we can integrate Minecraft with Alfresco. I use the word gamification because that meant I got a slot, basically. So the object of this is to take Minecraft and look at how we can visualize Alfresco repository in that 3D environment. So there's my little man. He's going to help me out today. For those of you that don't know what Minecraft is, it's basically a game that's based on blocks. You get a 3D world, sandbox that you can sort of play in. The essential thing is that you can place blocks and you can destroy blocks. And there are lots of different types of blocks. Basically, think of Lego, 3D Lego. And you can see I can make pretty patterns. I can build houses. I can put ladders on things and climb up them. I can put chests down and put my items in the chest. It's great fun. Those of you that got kids or nieces or nephews have probably been bored to death by them talking about Enderman and God knows what else. Okay, so there's our world, and that's our place to play in. So why on earth would I do this? Mostly just because I could. And I also need to think of something for a hackathon. But it does actually raise some interesting questions about how we think about the data and how we can integrate with Alfresco as well. And all the cool kids are doing it, of course. So how do we do this? Well, I use an open source project called Bucket, which adds a mod framework to Alfresco, to Minecraft. I then use the Minecraft commands and events to actually get into the Minecraft runtime. Of course, I use CMIS to connect to the repository. And then I use something that I invented, which is construction macros, which allow me to build pieces of buildings, which I can save, and then later reconstruct to build kind of actual constructs within the game. I went too fast. So here we're going to show you how I can get into the command framework. So if we look down the bottom, I'm just typing in help content craft, and that shows you the 4 commands that I've added. You can see there's a CMIS command. I can run that, and that will just test the connection to the Alfresco repository at the bottom there. So that's an example of how we can use commands. Events, what I've done here is the bulldozer command. You turn that on, and what it will do is listen for a break block, and then actually expand that to break 3 blocks instead. Okay, so those are our 2 kind of entry points, if you like, to Minecraft. The last bit is actually using Minecraft itself as a tool to develop the various building blocks we're going to use. So what I've done here is I've started recording a macro, and I can go ahead and construct my, my piece of the building. And then later on I can say, right, I'm done, I've finished, record that, and then I can actually reproduce that and recycle it. So you see I can just place a single block, and it will actually reconstruct that whole thing that I've recorded. So that gives me the building blocks now to actually construct something bigger against the data. So there's my Alfresco repository, just to show you that I'm not pretending or making it up. There's just some stuff in there. There's an engineering folder, all sorts of stuff, okay? Oh, what happened to that one? So this is here it comes through it. So, well, that was the exciting one as well. Okay, so what we're going to do now is actually do the nuts and bolts. So I'm going to run a build command against a site and give it a site name. And that's actually going to now build a library of all the information in my site. There we go. So you see that it's got 4 levels because each level represents a folder. And in a minute we're going to have a spin around and have a look at it. We've got the signs, which we'll see closer in a minute, that represent the names and the authors of those particular folders. And we can float around and admire the architecture. You'll see that each level is proportional, obviously, to the number of subfolders. And each subfolder has a little room with chests and bookshelves in it where we can eventually store the content. What we did in the hackathon yesterday was actually start to add books into those chests. So if you're really interested, you can come and show me. Come and grab me later, and I'll show you. You can actually read a book now that represents the content in there. So we're going to go and have a look around. I think we're going to go up to the engineering folder. So we can climb the ladder, conveniently placed. Obviously, everybody wants to climb a ladder when they're looking for content. And here we go. So you might see there's obviously a lot of repeated structures. Again, we use those macros to actually repeatedly build this thing. So there's 2.0. No, we don't care about that. There's 2.2. So we keep rummaging around until we find the folder that we want. What do we want? 2.3, I think, because that's the cool RM release. There you go. So we can go into this room. Notice the pressure pad, so the doors automatically. And we've got a lovely view over the lake, and we can now start rummaging through our chests for our books. Now imagine there's books in there, which there are now. Okay. So again, the idea about this, obviously, it's a little bit futile in some respects, but the point is that we can obviously connect from anywhere to get to Alfresco, and we can, visualize the data in any which way we choose. Some of the things that we'll try and do in the future is actually make this a live link to the repo. So as you add stuff, you actually see the building grow. You can imagine having a whole village of sites or a city of sites. One of my favorites is to add all the users as mobs, as they're called, so you can have the names above them. If you don't like them, you can go and stab them with a diamond sword. Okay, so that's it. In a minute, you'll see it's all up on GitHub. If you want to get involved, just give me a shout. And that's it. Watch it for my YouTube channel. Subscribe and like. Thank you.
Perfect. Wow, a lot of people. It's good stuff. Thanks for coming today. I'm going to talk about creating a high-performance Alfresco development team. The reason why I want to talk about this, we go to a lot of customers, a lot of clients, and they want to build their own Alfresco development team. They don't really know what to do. So this is like a step-by-step guide on how to create your own Alfresco development team. We start out by talking about the kind of people we want to have, who we're going to have, how are we going to tool them, what kind of best practices that they're going to be able to use so they can stay consistent and you can have a reliable, productive team. For the people that we want A players, obviously. We want people who not just know the technology, but they're constant learners. They're good team players. They communicate well. All those base things that you really can't take for granted, even though it's a technical person. You want them to code in the interview. They have to code. You want to see what their code is like. That's very, very important. You also want to be kind of tough in the interview. It's a lot easier to be tough in an interview than it is to fire somebody later because you weren't tough in an interview. So you want to do that. From a technical standpoint, they have to be strong with Java, but you really want somebody who does more than Java, what they call a polyglot programmer. Java's great, that's good, but you want them to also know something like Ruby or C# or Perl or etc., just to show that they're a bit more well-rounded. You also want to make sure you establish very consistent development practices. You need some kind of code of conduct. You need people to be able to have a playbook to go off of that is consistent. So if you don't have this, the link at the end will point to a place where you can get one to start with. And at least it's a good place to start, but you absolutely need that. Once you start in Alfresco development, you want people to learn on their own as much as they can to show initiative. Doing some of the tutorials, like on the Jeff Potts website, ECM Architect, that's a great place to start because it covers a whole gamut of things. There's Alfresco 101 YouTube. You also want to make sure that the people doing it have a great laptop. And it's not just to make them happy, it's to make them efficient. Because if you've got a good computer, lots of RAM, then they can do good work quicker. And you want to have the good tools. You can have open source tools, it's great, but IntelliJ is a really nice tool too. For infrastructure, you want to have the ability to grow your servers, your development servers on demand. Whether that's in-house, we have over 200 VMs in ours, but you could also expand out to Azure or Amazon or et cetera, have that flexibility to grow your development environment. Every dev team needs source control. You need some kind of build server. You need to be able to continuously build and integrate and run your tests. You need to have something like a Maven repository to handle your dependencies a lot easier, so you don't have to worry about it. It helps you go from project to project and unload developers easier. You need some kind of analysis. If you want to have a high-performing team, they need to be accountable. You need to be able to show that they're doing the right job. So you need to see the code, make sure there's no violations, have high test coverage. You also need to be able to go from project to project easier. So when we look at what you do in Alfresco development, start with the Maven SDK. That's a very easy way to get a project set up and running. Once you've got that, you look at everything else about the module that you want to create. In Alfresco, you do modules, and then you push those modules out. Those modules should have everything you need to deploy. You shouldn't have to go to environment to environment and create all these things manually. You should be able to do that as part of the module. You should be able to bootstrap all of that data so you don't have to worry about it. Every project I've ever done has at least these items in it. I mean, you have to do some kind of customizations for the metadata screens to show metadata. You want to have some logo. You want to integrate with a user directory like LDAP or AD. So everybody has to know how to do those things. Everybody also should know how to code these kinds of things, how to code custom actions, how to code custom web scripts. If you want to do a custom service layer underneath those things, every developer you have should know those things, and there's great tutorials out there. Start with JeffBox stuff. It's an easy place. We come to workflow, very similar to other share customizations. I know it's an evolving world if you've seen the activity stuff this morning, but there's going to be share screens, there's going to be model. One thing's a bit controversial for task listeners. We always recommend to do Java unless it's something simple. I know you can do JavaScript, and that's fine, but with Java you get the extra code analysis benefits and the extra code coverage benefits and the reusability benefits. I find that that's a bit better than just using the JavaScript. Unit testing everything, including your workflows. If you don't have 80% coverage, I really think you need to get there. I think anything less than 80%, and you can probably do better. You can actually do much better than 80% too, but you need that kind of accountability. As accountability goes, you should also have estimates on everything you're doing. Even if you start out not really knowing how to do it, create the estimates, then you have some kind of way to track that in the future. Everything about being a high-performing team is about being accountable as well. So we have to make sure that we're accountable to everybody. If you do all of these things, and you've got the good structure and framework for having a professional development team that follows best practices, everybody's on the same place, they're playing by the same playbook, they know what they're doing, everybody can go from each other's code and not have to think, wow, this looks different. This is pretty much the same. In the end, everybody's accountable. Everybody knows that their code is clear, it's clean, it's been tested, somebody else can pick it up, and they can feel good that they've delivered a quality product. And I think that's pretty much it. So, thanks.
Hey, so can you hear me? Yeah. So I'm going to talk about Ephesoft and Alfresco. So we did a project, so I'm going to talk about that today. So Ephesoft and Alfresco, the best duo for your digitization process. So I'm going to try to explain quickly what we did in this project, and I hope that you will understand everything. So first, my name is Ben Chevallereau. So I'm French. I'm working as a software architect for Armedia. I'm working on Alfresco project for the last 7 or 8 years, and Ephesoft project for the last 4 years. And the goal of the project was to scan all HR documents for the last 35 years and to store them in Alfresco. The biggest challenge in this project was to switch from a full paper world to a full electronic world. So from a user point of view, it has been really a huge challenge. What was the objective in this project? So quick and simple, to try to create a tool, so in Alfresco Share, to minimize the number of clicks, to automate as much as possible all HR process, and to manage the life cycle in Alfresco. So quick overview of the architecture. So users use Ephesoft to scan documents. Ephesoft is connected to the HR tool to get information from employees. Ephesoft export documents to Alfresco, and Alfresco is as well synchronized with the HR tool to keep the repository compliant. So the Ephesoft process is divided in 7 steps. The first one, you import document in Ephesoft. The second one, Ephesoft split documents in pages. After that, Ephesoft try to recognize document and to create logical documents from pages. The next step is the manual step, it's a review, but we'll explain that later. After that, Ephesoft extract documents from the HR tool based on employees. We ask the user to validate this information, and finally, we export these documents to Alfresco. So during the document review, we ask the user to validate if Ephesoft choose the right document type or not. So the user can use a preview on the right side, and on the left side we can see green mark and red mark. When it's a green mark, Ephesoft is quite sure about the document type. If it's a red mark, the user should check. On the validation step, we ask the user to check if the document match on the right side on with the information extracted from the HR tool, and potentially we ask the user to fill potential additional metadata depending on the document type. So we did a lot of customization in Alfresco Share. The first one is you are able directly from Alfresco Share to track what's happening in Ephesoft. You don't have to log into Ephesoft. The user can just use Alfresco user dashboard. So when documents are exported in Alfresco, we first classify documents, we attach metadata to each document, so it's extracted from the HR tool. We move the document to the right folder, and after we apply security, but we are going to talk about each point. So first we use a physical classification based on the employee ID, so not really user-friendly. So we use a virtual classification on the right side based on the last name, first name, and the employee ID. And we use as well multiple virtual classifications, so we can get all documents for a specific employee, or all documents for a specific section, or all documents for a specific document type. And as well, we are able to generate virtual classification based on custom metadata, like the last start date of an employee. Alfresco is completely synchronized with the HR tool, so nightly synchronized. So each time that something happening in the HR tool, it's updated in Alfresco, and Alfresco is in read-only mode for all these properties. We manage as well the life cycle in Alfresco, so if the employee leaves the company or joins the company, everything is synchronized with the HR tool, and documents switch from active to inactive status, and all dates are updated dynamically again, and it's driven by the HR tool. A big step when you are managing HR documents, it's to manage security. So depending on the category of the employee, we update permission. So we change groups. Again, it's completely driven by the HR tool. In Alfresco Share, it's not so easy to open a category. You have to do a lot of clicks. So first, we added on the dashboard a dashlet to be able to find an employee by first name, last name, and employee ID, and it opens the category, the proper category directly. We added as well an advanced search form directly on the dashboard to minimize the number of clicks, and we added some behavior like this one, so we check if the employee ID is the right one or not. So before to do any search in Alfresco, we check if this employee ID is the right one or not. Finally, we manage as well onboarding and offboarding process. So each time an employee leaves or joins the company, a set of documents has to be scanned and exported to Alfresco. So the employees doesn't have to do anything manually. If you scan the document in Ephesoft, it's exported in Alfresco, and Alfresco is updated. And we added as well another dashlet to be able to track this boarding process. So again, the user doesn't have to open the checklist. He can check that directly on the dashboard. So I hope that you liked this presentation, that you understood me, and if you have any question about this project, just let me know.
Hi everyone, I'm Tony Parzgnat. I'm a project manager and technical architect at Technology Services Group. We're an Alfresco partner based in Chicago. And today I'm going to talk about a plug-in free annotation tool that's open source, and it integrates very seamlessly with Alfresco Share. For those of you who are not familiar with annotations, it's basically markup that can be added to electronic documents or images that don't alter the original content of the document. They're stored separately. They can include text edits, comments, callouts. OpenAnnotate is an open source annotation tool that was developed by Technology Services Group. It supports annotations on a variety of document formats, anything that can be rendered to PDF or PNG image, so that includes all your Office formats. Some use cases with annotations, the more obvious case, documents with review of documents and markup for review and proofreading. More interesting use cases, images. We have used it with medical images as well as face tagging of photos. The advantage of OpenAnnotate is it's completely browser-based. There's no plugins. It works with all of your favorite and maybe not so favorite browsers, i.e. 8 Plus included. As I said, no plugins, no ActiveX, no Java applets. So basic annotation tools available within OpenAnnotate are sticky notes, lines, arrows, circles, ellipses, squares, and rectangles. Also available in our new release of OpenAnnotate, we're pretty excited that we now have the ability to highlight text and do strike through and insert text at a given location. Again, this is all plugin free. We're using a similar technology that the new HTML5 viewer uses in Alfresco 5. Another new feature that we have is the ability to reply to comments. So specifically in a peer review type scenario, a lot of times there's a need for somebody to add a comment, and then maybe the person who originally authored the document has some sort of response to a comment. OpenAnnotate also offers an annotation summary. This is kind of a one-stop shop to see if you have a large document, you can see where all the annotations are within the document, and each line is a hyperlink to a specific annotation. OpenAnnotate supports the Adobe XFDF standard, so all the annotations can be exported and burned into a PDF file that you can open in Adobe Acrobat. Little note about annotation security. You can create your own annotations on documents. Any other user in the system can view your annotations, but they cannot change them. Only the person who created them can change their own annotations. So as I mentioned, we have a seamless integration with Alfresco Share. It's exposed as an action in the document library for documents. So there's a nice link just to launch the tool from Share. And now I have a quick demonstration of how all this works. So here I am in Alfresco Share. I'll navigate to a site, go to the document library, and find a document that I want to add annotations to. In this case, I'll choose a backup and recovery procedure that is a Word doc natively. I click the Open Annotate link, and it launches the tool. From here across the top, you see all the tools that you can use within Open Annotate. The first bunch of tools is just for navigating through the document or image. I can scroll through the pages, zoom in, zoom out. You can see this particular document already has some annotations on it. There's a red arrow, a box, and a comment. When I hover over these, I can see the date and time the annotation was created, who created it, and any comments that were left by the person who added that annotation. Here's a quick view of the annotation summary. You can see this document has a number of annotations. The annotation summary is searchable. So within the search box, if I'm looking for something specific, I can search. Looks like my video stopped. Oh, there we go. I can search through the annotations. When I click on a search result, it takes me directly to that annotation within the document. Now I'm going to go through just adding a quick annotation. We really like our new highlight tool, so I'll use that. I can select the tool and find some text to highlight. Once I select text, a comment box appears allowing me to enter any type of comment that I have regarding my highlight annotation. Similarly, another new feature that we have is the ability to change the color of your annotations. I'm going to show creating a second annotation that's going to be an oval, and I'll select a blue color for doing that. I can just draw that around text, turns blue, and I can enter any comments here. The next feature I'm going to show real quick is the export to PDF. So there's a link at the top. There's an export button. Not sure what happened, but my video is running slow.
It's a very compressed talk, so I'm going to just get started with everybody and ask a simple question. How many of you are running Alfresco on cloud today? It's a quick show of hands. Oh, that's a good about 7 or 10. Okay, I'm Shah Rahman. I'm representing a company, CloudlyIO, and today I'm going to talk about the Azure, Microsoft Azure. How do you set up an Alfresco enterprise on Azure? And basically, I'm going to start off with, recently I've been talking to a lot of people. They would like to leverage cloud for ECM type applications, but they have a lot of concerns like data mobility and like security and so on. So introducing my company, basically what we do is we just make the data in and out of cloud, like moving to different places, a little bit easier. And we call it data mobility instead of migration, because we see this as not as a one-time deal. Sometimes we do it over and over. So Alfresco and Cloudly partnership, we are trying to become a cloud partner. We recently became a technology partner, and we have some artifacts on AWS and Azure, and we are trying to enable data mobility for it. So here's what Alfresco has today as on AWS, leveraging their global infrastructure and a reference architecture that covers a different number of different elements per se. And Azure is from Microsoft is quite similar to AWS, and I just have it just show here that basically it's been renamed to Microsoft Azure recently, and basically this is like the three-tier architecture, if you can think of like the front end, middle end, and the database layer. So some of the services that we'll be leveraging for Alfresco are mostly at the front end, the traffic manager and load balancer, virtual machines, and for storage in future, we'll be adding the blob storage for it. Okay, so so what does it look like when you try to do an enterprise on Azure? You leverage the similar infrastructure, which is similar to AWS, but the reference architecture is actually a little bit different than AWS. You start trying to leverage some of the AWS stuff, and then this is what it looks like in something that we have set up. And I listed out some of the elements which are different in Azure than AWS. So you have like the virtual network concept, the availability set concept, and cloud services concept. And virtual network gives that isolation. And from a network perspective, it's basically a configuration-driven network. It gives you the isolation you need so that it's secure, and it controls the DNS IP addresses as well as the subnets. And basically, it is a secure deployment, basically, and you have Azure is a little bit different than AWS from the security standpoint. It encapsulates a lot of things, and one of the things is the concept of endpoint. And you have the similar, the perimeter security and ACLs and so on. From database perspective, at present, Alfresco does not support Azure SQL. That's something on the roadmap and we're working on. But currently, it supports the natively, basically the Microsoft SQL Server, and that's what we have set up today. And basically, obviously, once the setup is done, one of the key points is to understand how to manage Alfresco from a platform and infrastructure perspectives, and what Azure provides, and basically what you have to do yourself from an application standpoint. So it's important to understand that. How do you manage that? And obviously, a lot of people want to go to cloud, and one of the prime reasons is really scaling and scale factors. So I just listed out some of the important scaling parameters that Azure brings to the table that helps you scale if you really have that requirement. And basically, so I have a small demo that just shows like what Azure UI looks like and how you actually have the VMs that you actually set up. These are Windows VMs, and once you have that set up, then you also set up an endpoint. Yeah, and you can see the endpoint is actually what your Alfresco setup will become, and it's sort of like, yeah. So we have this set up today. And some of the advantages. Why Azure? Obviously, it's an alternative to AWS. That's one part. And there's Microsoft and Windows are very familiar environments for a lot of people. And then past features makes it a little bit easier. And other than that, I think the SQL and other things are quite similar. So Cloudly expertise for as a new partner, basically we help with both cloud onboarding as well as the migration to cloud. If you have it's more in a way of basically trying it out, basically say it's another alternative you have on Azure that you can do. And we have a data mobility platform that we have built that can help you. If you have one kind of installation on the on-prem side and another on the cloud, then we can basically do the migration or refresh of the data between them. That's what we actually help with. So just a little picture of what we actually do on the platform. So basically we analyze your databases or file data. This one just shows the databases. And then sort of we transform that as necessary towards the target that you have, and then we actually make the move. So that's sort of like 3 steps. So basically, if you are considering Alfresco on Azure, then we'd like to talk to you, assess your current installations, and then basically maybe run some benchmark testing. And about the ECM data mobility, as the cloud comes about, maybe you may have multiple installations, trying to find a test drive for it, and we will be glad to talk to you. Thank you very much. Thanks, everybody.
Camera here? Good. Okay. All right, my name is Wijangco. I'm the Alfresco Practice Manager for Technology Services Group. We're based out of Chicago, Illinois, and we're going to talk about migrating from legacy ECM repositories into Alfresco. So as a brief overview, we're going to talk about migration pains. Obviously, at one point or other, people have to do migrations, and what does that entail? Aside from actually having the tools, having a methodology and approaches, talking about our migration framework called Open Migrate, and then going through some sample case studies that we've done from recent migrations. So migrations are complex. I think when we talk about it at a high level, migrations are simple. You're trying to go from point A to point B. But it's the devil in the details and what you have to do for that migration where it often becomes complex and what you want to do. So things that come into play when you're doing a migration. What document types, what formats do I want to migrate? Do I have to keep the creation date? Do I have to keep the same folder path that I have? Do I have to do versions, renditions? Are there associated contents? Are there workflows? So there's lots of things to consider, really, from just moving content from point A to point B. How you're going to map it. So am I changing my whole content model from the old system to the new system? Is there going to be downtime? So can the system only be down for the weekend? When we talk about legacy ECM systems, they can be a black box, which is even worse, right? Maybe no one knows anything about the platform anymore. They don't know what even version of that old ECM platform is. The hardware is old. It's hard to access the content. A lot of detailed cleanup is going to be required to actually get that content out of there. So we talk about migration methodology, right? So looking at the system, what are the holes and what do you need to do there? What does the business have to do to clean up all that content? Maybe you don't have to migrate everything that's there. Setting up the target execution, and then coming up with a run book, a step-by-step process of how you're going to do the migration. Testing, benchmarking is huge. How long is it going to take based on the network for you to do that migration? That's going to help you validate what you're going to do in production. How are you going to validate that the data is actually getting migrated? Different approaches to do the migration. One-time migration, if it's a small amount of content, you can do that in maybe a weekend. If it's staged, if you have a large amount of content, you have to break that over a period of time and maybe do a delta migration at the end. Rolling migrations, maybe that's something where you just actually migrate the content on an as-needed basis and not have a need to actually do a full migration. So obviously, doing migration, on your own, it's obviously like moving a house, right? You may try to do it yourself, then you realize, it was a bad idea. And so obviously, having those tools in place to help you jumpstart are important. So we have Open Migrate. We've been using this framework for a number of years. It's a migration tool for one-time or ongoing migrations. It's Java-based. It's open source. We have a lot of configuration and mapping and source and target adapters to make your migration easier. This is a high-level architecture where we have our source and target adapters, we have a queue system, a migration pipeline, and then we have these listeners that we can use to extend to add custom logic on how you're going to do your migration. Maybe there's something specific that you need to do from a business rule standpoint. There's API adapters for both document and Alfresco, can be high volume and multi-threaded. Everything's considered a node, whether it's a folder or an object, just like in Alfresco. And you can obviously extend it as needed, because no migration is really the same. Just a list of different migration adapters that we've developed in the past. Most of our focus is really around the Alfresco and document source adapters, but we've done other ECM repositories, simple file system databases, or accessing a database. Different ways that we've deployed Open Migrate within Alfresco. Obviously, the traditional one would be as an external interface. So it's run standalone in an online command application. Ideal for one-time migrations, uses the Alfresco standard API. Another approach that we've done that we use a lot is really to embed Open Migrate as a subsystem within Alfresco. So the benefit there is that we access the Java API directly. We can execute them via web script. Also great when you're going to do an ongoing migration into the repository. One thing we've also done is integrated with Alfresco's bulk import tool. So in that case, we actually use Open Migrate to capture all the business logic to create all the metadata to import into Alfresco. Then we hand it off to the bulk import tool, and it runs and imports it into the repository. Just some quick case studies of how we used Open Migrate in the past couple months. This company, a large retailer, they put reports into a file system, and we have Open Migrate running within Alfresco, and it talks to a file system and updates every 2 minutes and uploads any of the assets that are placed there into the repository. For an upgrade, instead of doing a point system upgrade from 2x to 3x to 4x, we actually just used Open Migrate to talk to the Alfresco source system and migrated directly into Alfresco, the latest version. Great when you're not having to skip all those steps to do that upgrade. This one, for a large insurance company, we actually used Alfresco with the bulk import tool to migrate over 5 million documents over a period of 6 months. We do initial migration and then delta migration at the end. And then the New York Philharmonic is one of our clients as well. They use Open Migrate in a number of ways outside of Alfresco as well as internally for rendition processes, to integrate with metadata from other sources, convert to JPEG 2000, OCR. So thank you very much.
Hello again. So today I'm here to talk about clean code and how to achieve 0 defects. that last part, zero defects, may be a bit controversial. It's not something that happens often, but you feel really good when it does. Is it possible? Yes. Is it easy? No. The way I look at it, there's a best and a worst case. The best case scenario, you deliver something and there's absolutely no defects, and that's fantastic. The worst case scenario with this is if you're using clean code, you still have a really nice code base. It's really clean. There's not many bugs. And if you need to change stuff, you can change it quickly and feel confident. So either way, that's a pretty good scenario. You can feel good that when you're using clean code to do your coding and you're following good practices, that you're delivering something of quality value that can change easily later on. So this is one definition of clean code. There's many of them, but I really like Grady's definition. Basically, it means you should be able to read the code clearly. You should be able to give your code to somebody who's not even that technical, and they can read through it because everything's named well, and it's not horrendously long, right? It's not really crazy to look at. It's just very clean. Everything's named well. Comments, honestly, you can get rid of comments except for the very rare case. Your code should be clean enough and easily named enough that you don't need the comments anymore. Your functions can be less than 10 lines. That's a little controversial as well. For the Kent's 4 simple rules, everything should pass, and you shouldn't have many duplicates. The DRY principle, don't repeat yourself. Minimize duplication, that'll help you out a lot. Test-driven development, another bit of a controversial thing that people are on either side of. Test-driven development is when you start off writing a test and it's failing, then you write the implementation for that test, and then you refactor it to make it a bit nicer. So you're going to go around that cycle over and over and over again. Really like that because you can feel confident with your code. Your code's getting designed well. It's naturally decoupled, and it's fairly easy to maintain. So we use test-driven development all across the board. It takes a little bit of time to get people used to. It feels a little slow in the beginning, but once you're successful with it, you can keep up a good cadence with your code. For coverage, it's not a problem if you're using TDD, but I do recommend at least 80% coverage. That can be a tough number for some people to get to, but once you're used to it, it's actually pretty easy to keep up. If you can't get there, you really should try hard. For best practices or a code of conduct, there should be something for developers to follow. Things like only ship quality software. Don't push out something if you know there's bugs in it. Just fix it. Extreme quality. There's one that our QA guy likes a lot, that QA should find nothing. It may not be real world, but that's what developers should strive for. Your code should be so clean that you don't expect QA to find any bugs with it. You expect them to find requirements issues, maybe. You should have a team that mentors each other and works together. You should also have everything be monitored, everything be accountable. You should be able to track things with code analysis. You should know what your coverage is. You should know if you have any code violations that you want to get rid of. There really should be no code violations in a given project. This is a tool called Sonar. This is a small project. It's got about 5,000 lines of code. There's 0 violations in it or issues. And then the test code coverage is just over 90%. And I'd even like that to be higher. But that's a fairly nice project, well maintained and easy to keep up with. One of the measurements that you see in a lot of code analysis tools is called cyclomatic complexity. It's basically the number of logic paths that your code goes to in a given function or class. It's really important to keep this tiny. If you're doing tiny functions like 10 lines or less, it's going to be hard to get outside of that anyway. For the big functions with a high complexity, we think of it as the canary in the coal mine. We think of it as something that's going to happen because you can't test all of those paths very easily. So it's very, very important to keep that number low. If we have anything over 8, then it has to be rewritten. And there's got to be a really good reason for it to even get that high. Solid principles is an object-oriented principles that we're not going to go into all the details. The first one we'll talk about, single responsibility principle. Essentially, your piece of code, your function, has one purpose and one purpose only. It should not be doing 2 or 3 things. It should not be, you shouldn't have a module that's trying to do a lot of different things. You have to keep focused. In terms of Alfresco, every action executor class you do, every web script you do, they should have one single purpose, just one responsibility. By doing this, you'll keep your code tighter, and it'll also be more modular. You'll be able to plug and play it easier. You'll be able to make it more reusable. Task listeners in the workflow, same thing. You don't have to have just one task listener that has all the code in it. You could have multiple task listeners and have all those different responsibilities separated out and easily modular. You want to track everything you're doing to make sure your code stays clean. The estimates are important because you want to get trending over time, but you need to know your coverage is good. You need to know you don't have complex code. You shouldn't have any violations. And you want to know how many bugs you're logging because that's a good indication if you're successful or not. And seeing that over time is a big deal. In essence, in your dev team, you should be evangelizing that this is the way things are, that you have a spirit of craftsmanship that everybody can buy into and be proud of. Once you do this once, you find that people finish a project and they're proud and they're done and they can move on to the next thing. It's a nice quote to leave by Uncle Bob, but it's true. You may feel like it's going slow in the beginning, but you keep stable productivity and you meet your goals in the end. So that's everything. There's more information up there on that site. And if you have any questions, drop by afterwards.
I'm very impressed. I think all these presenters did an excellent job. You can see the effort they put in. So let's have one more round of applause. So end of day tomorrow is the next round of lightning talks. We'll see you there.